a city that has been in darkness for 65 years. This is the story of a town which hasn't seen sunlight in over 6 decades. The town of Siberia, which lies in the remote Siberian wilderness, has never seen daylight since 1957. Eternal darkness reigns, shrouded by an eerie silence that has lasted for generations. But why? Why have the residents never seen the sun? And what is life like for them without sunlight? How do they even survive? If you're curious to find out more, stay with us until the end of this video. You are in for a real treat. The first thing you need to know about this place is where exactly it's located. The town isn't actually located at the North Pole or anywhere near it. In fact, it's only 200 miles from the Arctic Circle. So, why doesn't the sun shine there? What makes this town so unique is its location in a deep valley, surrounded by tall mountains on all sides. These mountains are between 4,000 and 6,000 feet high, creating a wall around the settlement. Because of their height, the mountains block all the sunlight from reaching the town below. As a result, the sun has not shone on the earth here since October 1957. That means that for over 6 decades, the town has experienced nothing but endless darkness. Siashix is situated in the Sakha Republic of Russia. The town was originally established as a coal mining settlement back in 1938. It has come to around 50,000 people who live in perpetual darkness. Located 4,000 miles east of Moscow, the town is simply too far from any major city. In fact, the nearest big city is Yakashak, which is 600 miles away, and getting there requires crossing impassable terrain. It is almost impossible to reach this town unless you really have to. Even though the town doesn't get much foot traffic, it does get a steady flow of mail every day. Mail that reaches here comes through a supply plane that lands at the nearby airstrip. Locals say the pilots of these planes sometimes get scared when they land, because the mountains surrounding the town are always covered in fog, and if they touch down in such conditions, they could easily smash into them. Thankfully, the pilots are experienced enough to avoid such mishaps. Life in this unusual settlement can be tough, especially for children born after the sun stopped shining. Imagine being born and living your whole life under such conditions. It must be quite strange. People who are born and raised in sunny places can't imagine how challenging it must be. But for those born and raised in cities like Siberia, it's a different story. Since the sun doesn't shine in this town, the locals don't have a day-night cycle like we do. They instead follow a schedule set by the government that dictates when to sleep, wake up, and work. But interestingly, it's not just one single time for sleeping and waking up. For example, during summer, people tend to wake up earlier than usual. But despite that, they still have to go to bed by 10 p.m. even though it's summertime and people would normally be going to bed late. This rule applies to everyone, regardless of their age. Kids have to be tucked in by 10 p.m., while working hours start at 8 a.m. All this is to maintain order and sanity among the population, which seems to be working great because nobody has ever gone mad due to the darkness. And given the lack of sunlight, it's understandable why this measure was put in place. It's also interesting to note that despite the darkness, they still experience 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And this is thanks to temperature changes. However, summer and winter are almost the same. The average summer temperature in this town is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and when winter arrives, it hovers around 54 degrees Fahrenheit. So basically, they experience mild winters and summers. Spring and fall are the only seasons when temperatures fluctuate greatly. They can range from lows of 14 degrees Fahrenheit to highs of 68 degrees Fahrenheit. But generally speaking, the weather in this town remains pleasant throughout the year. So how do the locals tell the time? Since they don't have access to natural light, they have to rely on artificial sources. They have special clocks installed in every building that display the time. Everyone in town follows the Moscow time zone, which keeps them in sync with the rest of Russia. Every clock is set to Moscow time when the supply plane lands. If you think this place sounds depressing, then you'd be right. Living in a dark, isolated place can get pretty lonely. After all, who would want to live in a town that never sees the sun? Yet people here seem to be happy. Maybe it's because they've never seen the sun, so they don't know what they're missing. But it's also possible that people here are just really good at adapting. There's no denying that this place is beautiful, even though it's shrouded in darkness. Lush green hills cover the area outside of town, making it look like a wonderland. Despite the isolation, the town has everything a regular town would have, such as parks, shops, and other amenities. It may not have the charm of a normal town, but it does offer all the necessities. Even the houses are similar to those found in typical Russian towns. The only difference is that they have to keep their curtains closed all the time. The sky here has never been blue, so the locals don't even know what color it is. They see the sky as black, even during daytime, and the sun is seen as just a bright spot that shines brightly in the sky. Interestingly, when the sun finally shone in this town after 65 years, many were shocked by its intensity. You'd think that seeing the sun after all this time would be amazing. But in reality, the sudden brightness was just too much for the locals to handle. When asked how it felt to see the sun for the first time, A local said she was stunned and didn't know what to do. She had heard stories about the sun from her elders, but had no idea what it looked like. Imagine hearing about something for your entire life, but never actually seeing it. When you finally see it, you're stunned. As you may have already guessed, the darkness in this town has had an impact on the locals' culture. Since the town was established, there have been only a few dozen marriages. It's not uncommon for men to marry women from neighboring villages. And when this happens, the man often has to move out. When someone leaves the town, they're not allowed to come back in. The reason behind this rule is simple. When someone leaves, they'll most likely never want to return to a town without sunlight. As a result, the town's population has remained low, hovering between 50,000 and 55,000 people. Most people may assume that living in a place like this would take a toll on one's mental health. But that's not the case. There have been studies conducted in this town to see how the darkness affects the human mind, and the results have been shocking. Most notably, locals seem to have better eyesight than people who live in sunny places. Researchers believe this is because the body adapts to its environment, so people living in darkness develop stronger eyesight than those who live in light. Also, their biological clocks are stronger, and they're less likely to suffer from seasonal affective disorder. Today, scientists from all over the world visit the town to study how humans adapt to such extreme environments. And if you ask the locals, they'll tell you they're proud to be part of a scientific marvel. They also invite people from around the world to visit their unique town and learn about their way of life. And who knows, maybe you'll be lucky enough to witness the rare sight of the sun shining in Siberia. Part 2. We uncovered a history of tragic events, including shipwrecks, colonial settlements, and pirate lore that make up the unique story of Ocracoke Island. We also learned about the unusual weather patterns that contribute to the island's lack of sunshine. These conditions have led to an eerie absence of sunlight, which has been felt most profoundly by the island's lighthouse keeper, Richard Etheridge, who has lived there for many years. The town itself is located on a barrier island off the coast of North Carolina and is only accessible by ferry. It's a small community of just a few hundred people who live there year-round, as well as many more who visit every year for tourism or vacation. The island is home to beautiful beaches, historic sites, and plenty of outdoor activities for visitors to enjoy. But it's also shrouded in mystery, and locals are often reluctant to share its secrets with outsiders. But what exactly is going on in this town? Why hasn't it seen the sun in so long? And what will happen next? To answer these questions, let's take a deeper dive into the science behind this natural phenomenon. As we discussed in Episode 1, one of the main reasons why Ocracoke Island has had such limited access to sunlight is due to the island sits at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and is surrounded by water on 3 sides. Because of this, it's constantly shrouded in fog, mist, and clouds, which block out the sun even when it's trying to shine through. Another factor contributing to the lack of sunlight is the island's proximity to the mainland. The Outer Banks of North Carolina are known for their wild horses, beautiful beaches, and unpredictable weather. Because of this, the island is often battered by storms that bring high winds and heavy rainfall, which further obscures any view of the sun. These conditions are made worse by the unique weather patterns that occur in the area. Ocracoke Island is located within the subtropical jet stream, which is a band of moisture-laden air that forms along the east coast of the United States each year. This jet stream brings with it warm ocean water from the Gulf of Mexico and combines it with cooler air from the north to create unstable weather conditions. This instability leads to frequent fog, mist, and cloud cover that can trap people on the island for days or even weeks at a time. For example, in March 2014, a group of tourists found themselves stranded on Ocracoke Island after their ferry was canceled due to heavy fog. They were forced to stay in their cars and wait until conditions improved enough for them to be rescued. Similarly, in January 2018, a cargo ship ran aground near the island, causing major disruptions to local businesses and residents alike because of thick fog and high winds. On top of all this, Ocracoke Island is home to a large number of trees and vegetation, which further obscure views of the sky. During the summer months, the thick canopy of leaves blocks out much of the direct sunlight, creating an eerie atmosphere that some have compared to living inside a rain. Even during the winter months, when there are fewer leaves on the trees, the thick branches still block out much of the light, making it difficult to see the sun. All these factors combine to create a unique environment unlike anywhere else in the world. And while it may be beautiful and serene at times, it can also be incredibly challenging for those who live there full-time. Richard Etheridge, the island's lighthouse keeper, has been stuck on Ocracoke Island for over 2 decades now due to these conditions. He spends his days tending to the historic lighthouse and his nights alone in his small cottage, listening to the waves crash against the shore and watching the fog roll in. He has become an expert on the island's weather patterns and knows when he can expect thick fog or high winds. But even after all this time, he still hasn't seen the sun. For someone who has lived in one place for so long without ever seeing what's happening outside of it, you might wonder what his life is like on Ocracoke. What does he do for entertainment? How does he stay sane in such isolation? And what does the future hold for him? While there isn't much to do on the island itself, Richard has found plenty of ways to keep himself entertained. He is an avid reader and has built up a large collection of books that he can choose from whenever he wants to curl up with a good story. He also enjoys writing poetry and has even published several collections of his work. In addition to his literary pursuits, Richard is also a talented musician and can play several instruments. He often plays old sea shanties and folk songs, which remind him of the island's rich history and maritime culture. Despite all these activities, Richard still admits that there are times when he feels lonely and isolated. Being on an island with no one around can be a daunting experience, especially when you haven't seen the sun in over 20 years. But Richard has found ways to cope with these feelings. He talks to the seagulls and other wildlife on the island, which helps him feel connected to something larger than himself. He also finds comfort in the knowledge that he is carrying on a long tradition of lighthouse keeping that dates back centuries. But what about the future? Will Richard ever get off the island? Will he ever see the sun again? Only time will tell. Some believe that someday soon, the weather conditions will change, and Richard will finally be able to experience the warmth of the sun on his skin. Others believe that he's simply meant to live out his days on the island, watching the fog roll in and the seagulls fly by. What do you think? Will Richard ever see the sun again? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps us out. And as always, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this series so far, you might want to check out our other videos, which explore similar topics. For example, we recently did a video on the mysterious town of Roanoke, which is another place in North Carolina that's steeped in history and mystery. The town was settled in the 1580s by Sir Walter Raleigh and was the first English colony in North America. However, when explorer John White returned to the settlement in 1590, he found it completely abandoned with no trace of the colonists anywhere to be found. This event became known as the Lost Colony of Roanoke and has baffled historians for centuries. We also did a video on the legend of Blackbeard, the infamous pirate who terrorized the waters of the Caribbean and the east coast of the United States in the early 18th century. Blackbeard was killed in a battle with British naval forces off the coast of North Carolina in 1780, but his legacy lives on in the form of stories, movies, and TV shows. If you're interested in learning more about these fascinating topics or others, be sure to check out our channel. Thanks for watching.